Hello everyone, welcome back. Strike Force 1. This is going to be game number 1 in my board wargaming education. And before we go over to the gaming table and take a look at it, I just wanted to give a few comments as to why I chose this game. And it has to do with the way I learn. I think some people learn well by immersion. They can jump into something very complex and kind of swim around until they start to figure it out, but that's not me. I do much better with the building block approach. I like to take something that's very simple and kind of cement it in my head, and then I take another block and put it on top of that, and then just kind of build my knowledge base up that way. And to my knowledge, Strike Force 1 is the most basic hex encounter war game that's ever been devised, and please feel free to correct me if that's not the case, but anyway, this one's going to be basic enough for me. And I think what I hope to get out of this is, I've actually already played a couple of games, so I shouldn't say what I hope to get out of it. What I've actually already gotten out of it is that it takes some very, very basic concepts of wargaming and allows you to concentrate on learning those concepts without a lot of other rules to confuse you or distract you. And so it's going to teach you like zones of control, which is very important to learn. I think as one of the very first things you should learn, how those work, how they impact your strategy. I think one thing that I learned that I actually didn't, had no concept of before I played the game was setting up, making sure you have a retreat path. That was something that I didn't even think about before I actually played, a game and, lost a couple of units because of that. So things like that, things like how to set up a line of defenses, with the hex grain as opposed to against it, and making sure you leave an empty hex between your units. Those little basic things aren't real obvious to someone who's never played war games before. So I feel like if I play this enough times, that I can start to get those ideas and concepts to be sort of second nature, at least in a very basic way, and allow me to build on that for more complex games. They're going to add a lot more detail. So anyway, this version that I have is the Victory Point Games edition. It's actually very nice. The counters are very nice. The map is well done, and it's obviously not a boxed game, but no, it's good. I like it. So let's go over to the gaming table and take a look at Strike Force 1. Okay, so what we're looking at here is not the Victory Point Games edition of Strike Force 1. This is my print and play edition, and I constructed this while I was waiting for the Victory Point edition to arrive in the mail. And the reason I'm showing it is just to demonstrate that you really don't have to spend a ton of money to start playing some of these very introductory war games. And Strike Force 1 in particular is very print and play friendly. And the reason for that is because all of the components that you see will easily fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So you can print them on your standard inkjet printer. And then what I did was I took some cardboard and I mounted the map and the counters, they're mounted on cardboard. I printed on a little bit of a thicker cardstock, and then I just used a little bit of this 3M spray adhesive and mounted them that way. The turn track marker is the only thing here that isn't from the print and play download package. I just made this on paint. It's very easy to do. And then, oh, actually I take that back. The advanced combat results table is that was a quickie that I made on Microsoft Excel from a picture of the actual combat results table that I had found online. So, but yeah, it just, you know, it was pretty easy to put together. It was fun, and it made a nice little free game. Free being like I spent like less than $5 for cardboard and paper. Probably the most expensive part of the game was buying the report cover. So that's just one possibility if you don't want to invest in a commercial copy of it. But now let's go ahead and take a look at the Victory Point Games Edition, because it's a lot nicer. Okay, so here we have the Victory Point Games Edition of Strike Force 1. As you can see, it's very nicely done. Lots of color. And just to quickly go over what you get in the Ziploc bag, you get a cover panel, and on the back of that you have a little bit about the history of the game, why it was developed and who developed it back at SPI. And then the back panel has a little bit about the Battle Lessons series and how those are used to kind of introduce new players to the world of wargaming. And also, you can see there it's got a little bit of kind of statistical data on the game. It's got a complexity level of 2, a solitaire suitability of 8, a little bit about the game scale. Each unit is a company, and each hex is a kilometer in width, and each game turn is approximately 3 hours. And you have the rule book, which I've noticed in my edition is an actual little booklet, which is kind of cool. I've seen in other editions where it's basically an 8.5 by 11 booklet, but this is like a little mini rule booklet. And then you have your combat results table with the standard game combat results table on one side, and then if you flip it over, you have the combat results table and the terrain effects chart for the advanced game on the reverse. And then you have your counters and a little teeny tiny dice in there, and your Ziploc bag, which is kind of a nice touch to store your counters in. So that's what you get with the game. Let's go ahead and take a look at the components in more detail, and we'll start with the map. Okay, so here we have the map, and according to the game description, this is representing a part of Germany near the Fulda Gap, which is during the Cold War, where they perceived that a Russian invasion might come from. And I actually went online and looked at a map of Germany to see if I could find any of these towns. And to my surprise, they actually are representing an actual part of Germany. And I'm going to go ahead and put up a graphic right now of the actual map of Germany. And you can see there up at the top, in the top left corner, Gannheim, and then right to the kind of center upper portion of the map is Esselben, and then Bergtheim is towards the bottom center. Now if you look at the map of the Strike Force 1, you'll see that north is actually pointing the wrong way, as Gannheim would be to the north of Bergtheim, but we'll give them a little bit of artistic license here, because they may have had to rearrange things in order to make it more playable, or playable in the way that they wanted to teach what they were trying to teach with it. So, but anyway, I just thought it was kind of cool that it was representing an actual part of Germany and not just a fictitious made-up thing. So that's the map. You've got 5 woods hexes, which are in the game not enterable or passable. You've got the 3 town hexes, which are the main objective hexes in the game. And then you've got a letter in each hex that is a setup point for one of the counters. So the American units will set up in these 4 hexes, and the Soviets will set up in these 6 hexes over here. And then up at the top you've got your game turn track and your sequence of play, and a little bit of
description over there in the corner. So it's not, there's not a lot to it, but for what they have on here, it's well represented and straightforward, and I think they did a good job. Okay, next up is the rule book. The rule book was actually very well done, in my opinion. I thought that the way they wrote it was very readable. They explained everything in a very straightforward way, and as you can see, they provide a lot of illustrations. I actually scanned the rules with the intent of doing some highlighting and note-taking, and then I found that everywhere where I went to go highlight something, they had already highlighted it for me. So very well done on the rules. And then after the rules, you get a walkthrough of an actual game, step by step, with a little bit of strategy notes and tips on how to set up your defenses, and basically this is what they mean with the battle lesson part of the game. They're actually, it's not just giving you the rules, but they're trying to teach you wargaming concepts, basic wargaming concepts, and that's part of the reason why I really wanted to invest in the Victory Point Games edition, was to get some of this extra data that you don't get with the print and play. And I just thought that the rules were really well done in this game. I have actually read or tried to read rules from other games that I have, older games from the 70s, and I thought this, even though the game is a lot simpler obviously, but their approach to the rules was just very well done, and I really want to give it 2 thumbs up to that. Okay, just real quick on the counters. I don't have a lot to say on the counters, but they're kind of basic, but all of the units in this game have identical combat and movement allowances, so there wasn't really any need to put numbers on the counters. The only thing I really want to say about them is, as you can see, they're 3/4 inch counters, and I know I've read and seen in other reviews of Victory Point games that people didn't like the fact that some of the counters had a flat finish on them, and these actually have a glossy kind of shine to them, and so they look like counters you'd get in any other GMT or any other manufacturer's games. They have pretty good color, and they're nice and thick, and well done counters. Okay, so here's the combat results table for the standard game. There are 4 possible outcomes of combat. There's the defender retreats 1 hex, the attacker retreats 1 hex, and then defender eliminated and attacker eliminated. I suppose the only thing that I would really comment on the results table at first glance is that it doesn't look like attacking with 1 unit is a very good proposition, as you have a 4 in 6 chance of a negative result as the attacker, and then at 2 units it's 50-50, and then at 3 units you start to see an advantage for the attacker. So that's for the basic game, and then on the reverse side is the advanced game, and it looks a little bit closer to what you might see on a more advanced war game, although it's still very basic, but it has the combat differential because it allows stacking, and you can have more than 1 unit attacking from 1 hex. So I will probably talk more about that when we do the next video, which will feature the advanced game. But as you can see, it's slightly different, and then you have a terrain effects chart because woods hexes are not forbidden in the advanced rules. They just cost an extra movement point. So that's that. Okay, so here we have the sequence of play, and it's printed directly on the map for convenience. And as you would expect from an introductory game, it's pretty simple. There's 4 phases to each turn, and in this chart they're labeled steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it boils down to basically a movement and combat phase for each player. So as you can see there in step 1, you have the Soviet player movement phase, where he can move any, all, none of his units as he so desires. And then immediately after he moves his units, he will declare combat on any US units that he is in position to attack. And then all combats are resolved prior to the US player's portion of the turn. And then, so once all the combat is resolved from the Soviet side, the US player makes his movement phase and then his attack phase. So, pretty simple. Of course, after you would complete all 4 steps, you would move your game turn marker to the next turn. All the units are identical in this game, which means that there's no differentiation between types of units having different movement allowances. All the units are infantry units, and all of the units have a movement allowance of 4 hexes, meaning that during the movement phase the player can move them up to 4 hexes maximum, but the player is not obligated to move the full 4 hexes for any particular unit. So if I'm moving, like say this unit, I can move him 1 unit, or I can move him 1 hex, 2 hexes, 3 hexes, or 4, and I can move in any direction that I want. I can change a direction as many times as I want. There's no restrictions on that. Movement, I said, is voluntary, so a player doesn't have to move any of his units if he doesn't want to, or he can move all of his units. It's strictly up to the player's desire there. The restrictions on movement, there are 5 of them, and the first one is basically has to do with stacking. And in the basic game, there's no stacking allowed. So if I was in this situation headed north with this unit here, I would basically have to go 1, 2, 3 and stop there. Or if I wanted to use my full 4 points, I would have to change direction, because I wouldn't be allowed to end my movement in the same hex as another friendly unit. So that's the first restriction. The second restriction is basically these 5 wood hexes in the game. In the basic game, you cannot enter or pass through the woods hexes, so the only option you would have would be to go around them. You can't pass through them or stop on them. So that's pretty simple. The third restriction is that you're not allowed to leave the map. So you can't, there's not really any way to leave the map down on the edges, but on the bottom here you see they have these little half hexes. Those are not enterable. So, you know, if you're in a situation where you were trying to avoid this unit zone of control, which we're going to talk about in a minute, you wouldn't be able to enter this half hex down here. That's not legal. So you have to stay in the numbered hexes. So that's the third restriction. Now the last 2 restrictions have to do with what's called zones of control. And that's one of the concepts that this game is trying to introduce, one of the basic wargaming concepts that they're they're introducing the new player to. So basically a zone of control, very simply, is the 6 hexes that surround your enemy counters. So if we're the Soviet player and the US player is the enemy, the zones of control at this point would be these 6 hexes surrounding unit W, these 6 hexes surrounding unit X, these 6 hexes surrounding unit Y, and then these 5 that surround unit Z. That wouldn't count because it's not a hex. Now the way that zones of control restrict movement are, if you were, say, here and you were headed west and you moved 1, 2, you would have to stop at the very first hex that was part of any enemy unit zone of control that you entered. So even though you only moved 2 and you have 2 points left, you can't use them because you've entered an enemy unit zone of control and you have to stop immediately. And that really is any unit zone of control. So if you're up here and you're moving this way, you'd have to stop here. If you're moving this way, you'd have to stop here. Any hex that's part of a unit's zone of control, enemy unit zone of control, as soon as you enter it, you stop. So the last restriction comes into play if you begin your movement already in an enemy unit zone of control. Say you landed here on your last movement turn, and you're beginning your movement turn in this situation here where you're starting out an enemy unit zone of control. The restriction is that you cannot, as the first hex you enter as part of your unit, or part of your movement, you cannot enter another zone of control hex. So either for the zone that you're already in or a different zone. So if we were in this situation right here, really the only option as far as a direction for the initial direction that this player, the Soviet player, would have would be to move this way. If assuming he wanted to move. Obviously you don't have to move, you could just stay there and not move at all. But if you wanted to move, the only direction he could move for his first hex would be that way. And the reason being is because this hex is part of this zone of control. This hex would be part of this unit zone of control and this unit zone of control. And then this hex would be part of this unit zone of control. And since in the basic game the woods hexes are off limits, his only option would be to move that way. So that is basically all of the movement rules in Strike Force 1. One last kind of clarification on the zone of control rule as regards to movement is, if we go back to the last example we had where we had this set up here, you know, and we said yes, this if the Soviet player wanted to move, he would have to, as his first hex, enter that hex there. Once he's done that, he's cleared all the zones of control for the 4 U.S. units. And at that point, he can now change direction and go any direction he wants. So he could go to this hex as long as, you know, as he can't go directly from this hex to this hex, but he can go from this hex this way and then back here. So that's kind of a way to get around that zone of control rule, assuming you wanted to go from here to here. You just have to clear the zones of control first with the first hex you enter, and then at that point you're free to go in any direction you want, including into another zone of control hex. So I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, combat. Let's see, the combat rule that we should probably start with is that combat is voluntary. Just because you have a unit in a position where it's eligible to conduct an attack does not obligate you to attack. So you do have the option of not attacking an adjacent unit, which basically is the second rule. Which is that you basically can only attack a unit that's adjacent to your unit during your combat phase. So if you see here in this situation, we'll call the Russian unit A there because it looks like an A, would be eligible to declare an attack on the US unit X. But if he was in this situation, he would not. He has to be adjacent. If you have more than one unit adjacent to the unit you wish to attack, you can have all 3 up to as many units as you can get to be adjacent to the unit you want to attack. you can have participate in the attack on the unit. You cannot attack more than one enemy unit at a time, so you wouldn't have a combined attack in this case. You can only attack one hex. You can only target one hex in a particular attack. So like for this situation here, you could, for instance, have these three Soviet units attack Unit X, and these two could attack Unit Y. Or you could have these 4 units attack Unit X and this 1 unit attack Unit Y. Or you could do 3 and 3. There's a number of ways you could break this combination up, but basically what it's saying is that you can only target one enemy hex per attack. Another limitation on combat is that a unit can only participate in one attack per turn. So if you had, for instance, this situation, which actually came up in one of the games I was playing, where the Soviet player wants to take Esselben, and he only has one unit C, in a position to attack the Unit Y that's in Esselben. Unit X has got the other 2 units pinned down. So if the Soviet player declares an attack with these 2 units on Unit X, and let's say he wins that attack and gains a retreat, we're going to talk about advance after retreat in a minute, but and his unit is allowed to advance into the hex vacated by the retreating US unit. On his next combat, he cannot now say that he's going to have A and C attack Y, because A has already participated in a combat for that turn. So he still only has the option of attacking Esselben with Unit C. So let's say you had this situation here. We'll just do a simple example. You're going to say that as the Soviet player, I'm going to attack Unit W in Esselben and try to take control of that town hex. You would go ahead and roll your dice and find the dice. Okay, so you would roll your dice, and of course it rolls off of the view of the camera, and you rolled a 1. So you would go over to the combat results table. We'll go ahead and pan up real quick. And we'll see that if I have 2 units attacking and I roll a 1, I have a result of defender retreats 1 hex. So we'll go back down, and we'll see that Unit W now has to retreat. So he will retreat. Let's say the US player chooses to retreat to that hex. The Soviet player now has the option to advance one of his units, it can be either one, into the Esselben town hex. So either one of those can occupy the town. And now he's taken that victory objective. Okay, I just wanted to touch on a couple of specific examples where you could lose a unit because you are not afforded a retreat path. In this situation here, let's say that the US player has received a withdraw 1 hex after being attacked by the two Soviet units. You can see that any direction he could withdraw to would be in a zone of control for one of the 2 Soviet units, and since he's not allowed to withdraw to a woods hex, in this case he would just be eliminated. It would be the same as a unit eliminated result, and that's one of the things you're going to try to do when you're positioning your units for attack, is to try to cut off the retreat path, so any retreat result will be effectively an eliminated result. Here's another variation on on the situation that we just talked about, where a unit would be eliminated. I wanted to show this just because, let's just say Unit W was forced to retreat after combat with Unit A, their Soviet Unit A. Any direction that he can retreat to, in as far as these 3 hexes, would be in one of the Soviet unit's zone of control hexes, except for this hex here, which is occupied by one of his own friendly units. And you cannot withdraw to a hex containing a friendly unit in the basic game because of the stacking limitation. So even though he has a friendly unit adjacent to him, if he had received a withdraw after combat, he would be eliminated because he has nowhere to go. So. Okay, victory conditions. Basically, how do you tell who won the game? At the end of the 4th game turn, the object for the Soviet player is to occupy 2 of these 3 town hexes at the end of the game. And as you can see, if this were the way the game ended up, with the Soviet player occupying the 2 town hexes here, he would be declared the winner of the game. If he was in this situation, the US player would be declared the winner because he only physically occupies 1 town hex, and the US player occupies the other, and no player occupies the 3rd. So it's basically that simple. There's no possibility for a tie or a draw. Either the Soviet player occupies 2 town hexes or he doesn't, and that's how you determine the winner. Okay, now that we've gone through the rules, let's go ahead and do a quick playthrough so we can demonstrate the game mechanics in an actual game. I'm going to do this in real time, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time thinking about strategy, otherwise the video would get kind of long. So I'm just going to kind of do this in a hurry-up fashion. But basically, if we're going to start, we move our game turn counter to game turn 1. The Soviet player goes first, and it's his movement phase, so he's going to open up. It's pretty standard for the Soviet player on his first move in the basic game to, that's 4, to move into position to attack or have a 3-to-1 attack on Unit X, and then move this guy up here, and then we'll 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we will let that be the end of the Soviet movement phase. So now we'll enter the Soviet combat phase, and he is going to declare an attack here on Unit X with these 3 units here. So we'll roll the die, and we roll a 6. That's never good. High unit, basically higher numbers in this combat results table are bad for the attacker. So if we look over here on the 3-unit column down at the 6, the attacker retreat 1 hex result is what we get. So we basically have to back each attacking unit up 1 hex. And as I said in the rules overview, the defender does not advance after a successful defense. So he would not advance into that hex. He would stay put. And that's the only attack that the Soviet player wants to make in his turn. So now it becomes the US player's half of game turn 1. And we'll start with the US movement phase. And what would be a good idea for the US player here is to go ahead and set up a defensive line, maybe here like that. It's always a good idea when you're setting up a defensive line to have an empty hex in between each of your units. So we have a nice defensive array there for the US unit. It was a very fortunate result of the Soviet players' attack. So given that the US player is pretty much in a defensive posture in this game, oftentimes the US player won't choose to attack at all, and that's going to be the case here. I think the US player is going to stand pat and not conduct any attacks, and since that ends the fourth part of the sequence of play, we'll move the game turn marker to turn 2, and it goes back to the Soviet player. So I think in this situation, for the Soviet player, we'll go ahead and we got to try to push back, and we'll make some pretty kind of high risk, well, not high risk, but not great risk attacks on these two US units right here, with these two units attacking this one and these two attacking this one. And notice in the way the US player lined up his units, the Soviet player can't get any more than a 2-to-1 advantage, because you know, he can't move through that zone of control to get into this hex and to get any kind of 3-unit action on one hex. So it's always a good defensive posture to have this situation here. So the Soviet player will go ahead and line up for these two attacks here, and we'll go top to bottom and we'll see what we get. Alright, we get a 2 on the first one, and if we look at the combat results table, we go over here to 2, we got defender retreats 1 hex. So the US player does have a choice of which direction to retreat, and so he's going to choose to retreat into the town of Esselben. And since the Soviet player was successful in his attack, he is going to choose to advance this unit into the vacated hex. And then we will move south to the next attack, which will be these two units on Unit X. And we will roll, and we get a 1. Low rolls are always good for the attacker. And we have a 2-unit column here. We rolled a 1. We get a defender retreats 1 hex. So the US player will defend, go ahead and retreat that way. And that will end the Soviet Union's combat phase, and we will revert to the US player's half of game turn 2. And I think the only thing that the US player would do at this point, will go ahead and probably abandon the town of Esselben at this point and maintain that defensive formation, even though you're going to give up a town here. The Soviet player has to get to. We're kind of trading real estate for time, and the fact that we're going to be, you know, giving up a little bit of ground here, hopefully will not be a big issue, since we're going to slow his advance. So again, the US player will not declare any combat, even though he would only have 1 eligible situation anyway. And he will stand pat and advance the game turn marker to turn 3. If I can get it to sit still. Okay, so now what does the Soviet player want to do here? Well, we probably should go ahead and move into this town here, and we'll go ahead and move him up, and we'll move him this way, and we will kind of put a stranglehold on, which town is that? Esselben. And then he will move this unit into this position and this unit into this position, and see if we can keep pushing back on the US units. So we will declare 3 combats here. Actually, no, I take that back. We'll declare 2. We will have a situation where these 2 units will attack W, and these two units will attack X. And the reason we don't want these two units to attack Y is because we don't want to risk an attack or retreat result, which would force us to abandon our objective hex. So we will just conduct these two attacks here, and we'll start with the top one and go top to bottom. Oh, 6. Keep getting these high numbers. So for the 2 units, the result of 6 is attacker retreats 1 hex. And we will go that way. And we will roll again for this attack here. And we get a 4, and a 4 is also on a 2 unit attack, attacker retreats 1 hex. So that wasn't a very productive attack phase for the Soviets. And they do not look like they're in a very good position to win this game at this point. So with that being said, the US player now has a pretty good opportunity to stave off the Russians here by advancing here, which kind of pins down those two guys. And we could even at this point once again, let's see, I think we're good there. We should probably just stand pat here. So again, the US player isn't going to attack. He may not even conduct any attacks in this game, and that's not uncommon. I've played many games where the US player doesn't declare a single attack, especially if he's still in control during the 4th game turn, which it looks like he will be, because now we are on the last game turn, and the Soviet player is basically lost at this point because there really isn't any way he can get to any of the remaining town hexes. He does occupy Esselben here, but there's nothing he can do in his combat phase that will allow him to occupy either of these two hexes at the end of his turn. So at this point, you could go ahead and play for fun, and we'll go ahead and do that since we're just demonstrating game mechanics here. And the Soviet player, since he has nothing to lose, will go ahead and declare a attack here on these two units here, W and X, with these two and these two. Top to bottom again. Okay, it continues. So the attacker retreats 1 hex. Soviets are getting their tails kicked here in this game. And this puts up a dangerous situation for the Soviet player in this attack, because now if this I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm not sure what the rule is here, because if I was the Soviet player, I would probably not want to attack in this situation given the result of that top attack. I don't know if you have to pre-declare all your attacks. If you do, then I would think you would have to go ahead and roll. But this is a good example of leaving yourself a retreat path, because if this player, if this unit here is forced to retreat, it's going to have nowhere to go, and it'll be eliminated. So anyway, we'll go ahead, we'll forge ahead. These two units will attack unit X, and we'll just hope for a low number, even though the game's pretty much lost. And again, the Soviet player can get no luck in this game, and he would lose this unit since it can't retreat, and that would be the end of the Soviet player's turn. The US player could then, just for in your face, kind of go ahead and use his movement phase to occupy all 3 town hexes and declare that he doesn't, oh sorry, no, he wouldn't, he would not occupy this one. So if he wanted to do that, he could say, I'm going to declare a 1-to-1 attack Y to E. He's got nothing to lose at this point, so why not? And he'll roll a 2. I want a 1-to-1, and he gets a defender retreats 1 hex. Wouldn't you know it? The Soviet player's luck continues to be horrible, and at the end of game turn 4, the US player occupies all 3 town hexes, and the Soviet player occupies none. So it's a resounding victory for the US player, and the game would end at that point. Actually, the game could have ended when we discovered that the Soviet player had no way to reach his victory condition. it's kind of playing beyond that point is optional and pretty much up to the players. So I just did it for demonstration purposes, and I'm glad I did, because it showed that we got that result where we had to eliminate a unit due to a lack of retreat path, which is something I wanted to show, because it does happen quite often if you're not careful. And since I was going fast, I really wasn't careful to as a Soviet player, to make sure that I had my retreat paths set up before I declared attacks. So anyway, that's Strike Force 1 basic game. I'll go ahead and give you some closing comments on it, and that's going to be a wrap for this particular game. We'll go ahead and take a look at the optional rules and the advanced rules in another video. Okay, just going back in time a little bit here. If you were paying attention, you probably realized that at the end of game turn 2, I'm sorry, at the end of the combat phase for the Soviets in game turn 2, they had actually gained a defender retreat on this unit, and I did not remember to advance after combat that unit there. As it turns out, I didn't replay it because on the very next turn the US player backed up to maintain his line, and the Soviet player used his movement phase to occupy these hexes here in this way. So it ended up not being important, or I probably would have replayed that or started over. But I just wanted to show you, yeah, it's real easy to forget stuff, especially when you're trying to play fast. So always take your time and just go at a pace where you're not being rushed, because especially when you're playing solo, you don't have that second set of eyes to say, oh hey, don't forget to do that, and you're trying to concentrate on both sides. Anyway, just wanted to kind of put that out there. Yep, I definitely forgot to do an advance after combat there, but it did turn out not to make much of a difference in the way the game turned out. Okay, so that was Strike Force 1, and that was my very first attempt to play a board war game, start to finish, completely per the instructions. And I know it's a very tiny game. It's a very simple game. A lot of people kind of think it's a joke, but I actually think it was a good place for me to start. The way I learn, as I said in the introduction, I like to really cement the foundation and then kind of build on it layer by layer. And I think this was just enough for that core foundation. It introduced me to concepts like zone of control, combat results table, very basic combat, things like arranging defense, defensive formations. It was just the right amount of substance for that first bite into wargaming. So I was pretty satisfied with it. I think it's an excellent tool for anybody that's brand new to wargaming and has to teach themselves. I think if I had somebody that was an experienced gamer to kind of coach me along, I might have been able to start with a more complex game. But I'm kind of glad I didn't. I think this is going to be a very enjoyable progression, going through these battle lesson series and just kind of treating it as an academic exercise. And I'm kind of looking forward to the future games in this series. So Strike Force 1, this was number 1. The next video I want to go ahead, and it'll be probably a lot shorter than this one. I know this one got kind of long, and I apologize for that. I don't know if I'll keep the same format in future videos because of the length, but I might split them up, or just try to, I may not have to cover rules in every game, especially the ones with longer rule sets. But anyway, in the next video, it's going to be a shorter video. I'm just going to kind of go over the
advanced rules for the advanced game, and then the optional rules for the advanced game. And then after that, Victory Point Games offers a Strike Force 1 expansion kit, and what this does is it really tries to build Strike Force 1 into an actual game, a very small game, but it actually tries to flesh it out into a more of a full game. And it'll bring in armor units, off-board support like air support, artillery support, things like random events, that kind of thing. And so that'll be probably the third video, and that'll end the Strike Force 1 portion of my board wargaming education, and then we'll figure out where we're going to go from there. So I give it high marks as a learning tool. I don't think it was too basic for a starting point, and bravo to Victory Point for putting this out. So that's going to wrap up this first week, or this first video, and I will talk to you guys next time.